time to take a look at everyone's favourite murderous walking war crime that is the Penitent engine. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy and tactics focused 40k channel where we're all about trying to get the most out of our miniatures on the table. Today's subject, the Penitent engine, is certainly one of the darker aspects of Warhammer 40k, recently reimagined for the brand new Sisters of Battle Codex. In this video we'll be taking a look at its datasheet, any obvious buffs and synergies that we can see on the table, and how I would use them in a game of 40k myself. In the background, the Penitent engines are crewed by pilots who have committed a crime too terrible for any normal punishment. Priests who have fallen from grace, or battle sisters who have caused the death of their squad sisters. To be chained to a Penitent engine is to have never-ending pain fed directly into your brain, the war engine itself feeding off this heightened agony, propelling the victim/pilot towards a grisly end in close combat, hopefully earning absolution in the eyes of the Emperor. The engines themselves bear horrific buzz blades and flails, and make excellent shock troopers for the Sisters of Battle. Very nasty indeed, probably one of the fates that you'd least like to suffer in the horrendous 41st millennium, but let's see how these murder machines can perform on the table. Penitent engines are a heavy supports choice for Codex Sisters of Battle. They'll set you back 56 points per model, and you can buy them in squads of 1 to 3. They have 7-inch movement, weapon skill 4+, ballistic skill 5+, strength and toughness 5, 5 wounds, 4 attacks, leadership 8 and a 4-up save. They have the vehicle keyword, but they don't have the Adepta Sororitas keyword, which does hold them back in terms of certain buffs and synergies throughout the Codex. They're equipped with 2 heavy flamers and either 2 penitent flails, 2 penitent buzz blades, or 1 of each. The buzz blades are your anti-tank and anti-heavy option, with strength +3, so strength 8, AP -3, and damage 2. And when you're armed with 2 of these things you get an extra attack. The penitent flails are your anti-infantry option. They'll be hitting at strength +1, so strength 6, AP -2, and damage 1. But you get to make 3 hit rolls for every attack made by this weapon, so he'll be typically at 12 attacks on the charge, or 15 attacks when he's armed with 2 of them, because you add 1 to the attacks characteristic if you're armed with 2 flails as well. So 1 heavy anti-infantry option, 1 heavy anti-tank option. We'll have a quick look at the numbers for them later, but we'll just have a look at his special rules first. First of all, we have Zealot, which is reroll hits in the first round of close combat if you charged, were charged, or made a heroic intervention. So that'll mean they'll be typically hitting 3/4 of the time, around 3 hits with those buzz blades, or 9 hits with those flails. They also have the Berserk Killing Machine special rule, so when they lose a wound, you roll a dice and ignore the wound on a 5+, so it's a 5+ feel no pain type save, which typically equates to a 50% durability increase overall. So on average your opponent will have to chew through around 7 or 8 wounds worth of this thing before it goes down. It doesn't have Shield of Faith, no invul save, it doesn't have Sacred Rites, it doesn't have Acts of Faith, and it doesn't have an Order Conviction, but you can include these in a detachment without breaking the Order benefits for the other unit in the detachment. So overall, this is a bit of a berserk killing machine that you're just going to want to set up near the front of your deployment and throw heedlessly at the foe to put pressure on the opposing army and hopefully get to work on them with scary close combat weapons and scary heavy flamers. As its main weakness is a middling defensive profile for its points cost. They will go down very easily to mid-strength anti-vehicle weapons like autocannons and the like. All that being said, let's see how we can buff it on the table. Going through the HQ section, these guys can't benefit from the Canoness's reroll 1s due to them not being an order, but they can be given a 6-up invul save from Celestine's Saintly Blessings, so it could be good to run up alongside them and buff their durability slightly. None of the combat buffs from the Triumph of St. Catherine work with it, and nor do Junith Eruta's rerolls. A Missionary's war hymns unfortunately also don't work with the Penitent engines despite them being Adeptus Ministorum, because it has to be Adeptus Ministorum infantry models to benefit from this. That's a shame because it would have been very nice to have an additional attack per Penitent engine. The only benefit of having a nearby missionary is that his Word of the Emperor does work on them, as Penitent engines could potentially flee if you lose a couple of them and there are some enemy debuffing leadership options about. Under normal circumstances they can never flee, even if you lose 2 and roll a 6 for your leadership test, but if you have any leadership abilities then it is technically possible. Finally, neither the Imagifier, Hospitaller or Dialogus can get any benefit at all to these Penitent engines. So a lot of talking about buffs that they can't receive there. Generally besides Celestine, you're not really going to be able to buff these guys up at all, so they really are just independent operatives to throw at the enemy army. There's one relic that could potentially help them, which is the Casket of Penance, the Valor's Heart unique relic. This subtracts -1 toughness from enemy units within 1 inches, so you could use this to have your Penitent engines be able to wound just that little bit easier against key targets. It might be hard to get this in play, however, because it does mean putting something like a Canoness on the front line and getting them into close combat, which isn't very conducive for them living very long. The Penitent engines do have their unique stratagem though they're locked out of almost all the others due to their keywords. It's a very powerful one though because it's their fight again stratagem. So for 3 command points, you could have your murderous unit of war machines pile in and fight another time, and that's going to be particularly powerful if you do have a unit of 3 of them. Other than this, the only stratagems you're likely to be using are 2 command points to interrupt, and perhaps the odd command reroll which could help them get into close combat. So how would I field them on the tabletop then? First, I think we should take a look at the numbers for their 2 different close combat weapons. I've included the relative damage output of the different options on the screen here, including the options for 2 flails, 2 buzzsaws, and 1 flail and 1 saw. The flails will do better against guardsmen and intercessors, killing 9 guardsmen and 3 intercessors on average, but a bit worse on toughness 7 and toughness 8 vehicles, where they'll just do 2.5 wounds on average. The saws will do pretty badly against light infantry in comparison, only killing 3 guardsmen, and will actually do slightly worse on the intercessors still, even though wounding on 2s with good AP and 2 damage is usually pretty decent on intercessors. They're flatly superior when we look at toughness 7 vehicles though, causing 4 wounds and then 3 wounds on toughness 8. If we mix the flail and the saw and choose the option that does best against each target, we do well against the guardsmen, killing 7 or 8, a little worse against the intercessors compared with the other 2 options, middling against toughness 7, and the same as having just flails against toughness 8. To be honest, I could happily see you taking any of these. They're still fairly decently good against all targets, no matter what weapons they're equipped with. On balance and personal preference, I'd probably take the 2 flails to absolutely pulverise light infantry and be decently good against everything else, but I could happily see you taking any option. One thing to consider is that you will have those 2 heavy flamers to help you deal with infantry, so maybe it is worth taking some buzzblades instead. Honestly, it's going to matter more what you're facing and how your opponent plays his units. That depends what kind of targets your Penitent engines are going to get to attack. It is quite good from a modelling perspective though, because it means that any Penitent engine that you build is going to be viable. In terms of an actual 40k game, I think the Penitent engines are going to be one of the units that you see more returns from if you take a decent number of them. Taking 1 or 2 probably means that they'll just be ignored until they get close and then get shot down in short order, as they aren't really all that tough. If you did go crazy and run 3 full squads of them, I could see that being a very scary threat, meaning that your opponent's going to have to completely give ground on the midfield, unless they want to have their units decimated by pain-racked traitors seeking a glorious death in close combat. If you do happen to be running Celestine, then it's probably worth taking her and running her up the board along with these guys, particularly if you're going to be experiencing some high AP anti-tank fire. But I'm not sure that I'd actually buy Celestine in literally just to buff these guys. She's more sort of if you were taking her anyway, then there's a reasonable synergy between them. In any case, I would take what Penitent engines that you have and put them at the very front of your deployment zone and throw them headlong down the centre of the board to make them very hard to avoid and giving them the best chance of getting into melee. Certainly in the first turn, if you have no charges to make, you'll be wanting to advance them, hopefully live through the enemy's shooting phase or counter charges, and then move them up, put those heavy flamers to good work, and then charge a target that you want to delete. The fight against stratagem is a very good use of command points if you can get it to go off. You can even plan your charge around it. If you're confident that you're going to mash an infantry squad that you know you're going to delete, you could position them so they'll be able to consolidate towards their next target and then activate again to hopefully take out 2 major threats in 1 turn. I'd particularly be looking to do this if I had any squads left with 3 Penitent engines in to get the most bang for the command points. Being lightweight vehicles that are going to want to start at the front of the deployment zone, prepared positions could be a good stratagem to use, particularly if you're going to be facing a lot of mid-AP anti-tank fire, things that are AP 1 or 2, that sort of thing, where you'll have the biggest benefit possible from having +1 to your armour saves. Hopefully with enough of these shock troopers, you'll have a decent amount of your other Sisters of battle lines survive to put the rest of your plan into action, and you'll hopefully tie up the enemy army's firebase and close combat units for quite a decent portion of the battle while they deal with them. Obviously the main competitor for the Penitent engines are the Mortifiers, the new version that mounts a coffin instead of the heretic chain to the front. We'll probably be looking at these guys in their own video sometime, but they have numerous benefits and drawbacks, and I think that both can definitely see play. I'd personally arm the Mortifiers with heavy bolters over heavy flamers, and they can certainly chip in with decent ranged firepower as they advance up the board. Their close combat skill is pretty much similar. Their weapon skill 3 up, only very slightly behind the Zealot special rule, though Mortifiers will be better in ongoing combats that last more than one round. The Mortifiers have a 9-inch movement, which is better than the Penitent Engine's 7-inch, but they are a bit weaker in terms of defense because they only have a 6 up feel no pain rather than a 5 up feel no pain, meaning that Penitent Engines are on average 25% more durable than the Mortifiers. Overall, I think that both of the units are pretty strong and have their own advantages. It depends whether you prefer the toughness and heavy flamers of the Penitent Engines over the movement, heavy bolters, and mortal wounds rule that the Mortifiers have. So I'm glad to see that both units are viable and one doesn't trump the other. You could go absolutely mad and run virtually an entire army that's just Mortifiers and Penitent Engines, and that would be very glorious to see on the tabletop and quite a scary threat to face off against. So let me know your thoughts and opinions on these guys in the comments below. I think that they're a really strong choice, and they are a decent unit that you could build an army to make heavy use of to dominate the midfield of the game, and let your Battle Sister squads take objectives and blaze away at the enemy with their bolters. I'll certainly be looking to cover other Sisters of Battle units in the future, so let me know if there's any specific units that you'd like to see. And feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you don't want to miss any of the unit reviews. I have a Patreon page, feel free to check it out if you'd like to support the channel, as these videos do take a while to make. And of course a massive thank you to all of my Patreons who are instrumental to keeping this channel afloat. Thanks again for listening, I'll hope to see you guys next time.